That's what I want. Welcome to the Issues and Advocacy Committee's program planning program. We're going to be talking about planning the program for the 2021 to 2023 biennium. I'm Jean Pierce. My co-chair of the Issues and Advocacy Committee is Rosemary Heilman. You'll meet the other members as we go through the program. I want to start off by making a distinction between what do we mean by program and programs. So what we're talking about today is selected governmental issues chosen by members at the local, state, and national levels, particularly now it's local and state, for study and action. And this is going to be setting the course of study and action for the next biennium. This is opposed to programs, which are plans for speakers, discussion, other activities that are used in league meetings. Now, as you know, the US positions are captured in impact on issues, whereas the state league positions are described in where we stand. These positions are the result of grassroots efforts based on extensive study culminating in consensus meetings or concurrence with another league's position developed, once again, based on extensive study. Now, the criminal justice study is a good example of a consensus study. Currently, your local leagues are studying the issues, and then you're going to be submitting a consensus report to the state committee. The committee will compile the results and submit them to the state board. The state board will vote whether to accept the results. If they're accepted, the changes will be added to where we stand. And then in June, the convention delegates will vote on whether to affirm the positions in where we stand. There's a similar process for program planning. Beginning at the local leagues, you're examining the current state positions, making recommendations for study, action focus, and also telling us whether you're willing to help on some of the program issues for the coming 2 years. And then you may decide to propose a concurrence with a league's existing position. You'll submit your report to the Issues and Advocacy Committee, which will compile the results, consider recommendations for adopting new positions, report to the state board. The state board will vote whether to accept the recommendations. We'll share the recommendations with local leagues so that you'll be able to see these 6 weeks before the convention. And then at the convention, the delegates will vote on the program for the 2021-2023 biennium. Now, shortly, you're going to be meeting our state issues specialists. These are amazing people who track the legislation and determine recommendations for actions at the state level. Today, they're going to be describing positions and advocacy that we can take currently based on those positions. They're going to be, in some cases, pointing to some deficiencies of positions, but this doesn't necessarily mean that it warrants a whole new study. It's going to be up to you to decide, are these really serious enough that you would get behind and involved in a study of that issue. And in some cases, they're going to be making recommendations for action foci. Our positions are organized in 3 categories: representative government, natural resources, and social policies. So first, you're going to be meeting our representative government issue specialists. The issues that being addressed are abolishing the Electoral College, campaign finance and ethics, government consolidation, election laws, policy, redistricting, and citizen rights. So Joy Guscott-Mueller will begin with talking about abolishing the Electoral College.
Thank you, Jean. My name is Joy Guscott-Mueller, and I am the issue specialist for abolishment of the Electoral College by constitutional amendment. A league position for over 50 years and state action focus since 2017, abolishment of the Electoral College by constitutional amendment should be retained for the upcoming biennium. Progress of this issue has gained tremendous momentum, with the LWVIL Electoral College Committee having presented over 80 educational programs in Illinois and throughout the U.S., including caucuses at the state and national level, and addition of the position as a program item at the 2020 U.S. Convention. The recent presidential election and its aftermath brings into sharp relief and further demonstrates the divisiveness caused by the Electoral College, which artificially divides the U.S. into red and blue states. Next slide, please. As a result, many voters, Republicans in blue states and Democrats in red states, believe that their vote does not count. Next slide, please. Abolishment will result in a united vote. Next slide, please. A president and vice president elected by voters, not states. Next slide, please. The Electoral College can and will be abolished by our focused action and continued effort. Now more than ever, the abolishment of the Electoral College should be retained as an action focus for the 2021 and 2023 biennium. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Donna Limper. I'm the Money and Politics Specialist. In addition to the most expensive governor's race in Illinois history, party leaguers, mega donors, and special interests have used a campaign finance loophole nicknamed the millionaire's exemption to bypass campaign contribution caps. Then huge sums are transferred to selected candidates, concentrating political power into the hands of just a few people. While the League has long supported small donor matching programs like SB 1426, that bill is insufficient to deal with the scope of that problem. Our recommendation is for the League to consider campaign finance as an action focus for 21-23. We'd also like to take a more active role supporting the League of Women Voters US push for federal campaign finance reforms in the For the People Act. Next slide, please. An aggressive federal corruption probe pushed Illinois lawmakers to introduce 87 ethics bills in 2019. One of those bills created the Joint Commission on Ethics and Lobbying Reform. That body failed to deliver a promised report in March. Scandals, bills from both Republicans and Democrats, and media and political pressure will likely push this issue center stage in Illinois next year.
Oops, sorry.
In addition, local leagues wish to support local ethics ordinances at the municipal level. We'd like to consider ethics reform as an action focus for 21-23 and also push for federal ethics reform via the For the People Act. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jane Ballingy, and I have the consolidation of governmental units services to eliminate shared costs and taxes. Illinois has up to 8,000 taxing bodies, significantly more than any other state in the country. Elimination of taxing bodies through elimination or merger of counties, townships, communities, cities, and service entities is one way of dealing with this. Requires a study and review with input from citizens, cities, communities impacted, followed by an educational process, and then a public vote. New slide. The goal promotes efficient and effective administration operation of government. Does the proposal result in projected cost savings and positive effect on taxes over the long term? Or will the proposal either result in an increased quality and or efficiency of services? Or will the proposal fairly address disparities in employee contracts? Or will the proposal result in increased social and economic justice? And will the proposal result in a reduction in the number of government entities and their cost and taxes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sharon Alter, the election laws issue specialist, together with Barb Lymans, who's also my co-issue specialist. The election laws policy position is, as stated here, that the State League supports uniform election laws and procedures throughout the state to ensure the integrity of the election system and opposes term limits for members of the Illinois General Assembly. The State League believes that a good election system should provide stability and continuity of governance and should produce a legislature that addresses the problems of society effectively. It should also be resistant to both outright fraud and other forms of political manipulation. Next slide. Thank you. There are several underlying principles to elections laws policy. One is the integrity of the election system. Another is uniformity of practice and procedures throughout the state. And thirdly, removal of barriers to voting, such as language, access, and lack of information. During the next biennium, we will advocate, Barb and I will, and the State League, will advocate for a continuation of the many positive aspects of the emergency legislation that was passed in fall, that is this year, such as drop boxes, establishing Election Day as a state holiday, and permanent voter by mail lists as a pathway to all vote by mail. Let me correct that. The legislation was passed in the spring of 2020. And secondly, we will advocate for election methods that provide the broadest voter representation possible, have a positive effect on voter participation, and are expressive of voter choices. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paula Lawson, the redistricting issue specialist, along with Jane Ballingy. The League of Women Voters of Illinois has been working to get a constitutional amendment to change the redistricting process in Illinois on the ballot since 2010. The LWVIL redistricting position was adopted in 1993. The most recent proposed amendments did not require that each state senate consist of 2 House districts as stated in the Illinois position. The Illinois position also lacks mention of the use of an independent commission to draw maps and does not mention protection of communities of interest. However, the LWVUS redistricting position adopted in 2016 does include these provisions, so LWVIL has been able to actively support recently proposed constitutional amendments. Next slide, please. In 2021, following the release of census data, redistricting of federal, state, and local governmental bodies will be conducted. LWVIL will be encouraging local leagues and the public to participate in that process using We Draw the Line tools developed by Representable, a project supported by the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. Redistricting should be considered for an action focus in 2021-2022.
Okay, I'm Janet Kraft, the issue specialist for citizens' rights for reproductive choices. This position has been in use since its adoption in 1983. And though there are no plans to renew this, change this position, there are a couple of factors right now that affect it. There is a change in the composition of the US Supreme Court that could repeal Roe versus Wade or affect it very negatively. And also the Affordable Care Act passed in 2010 requires contraceptive care. So these two positions are really connected. Next slide, please. The League The position has been used for action in Illinois to decriminalize existing law on abortions. We also supported the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act using this position. And currently, the repeal of the Parental Notice for Abortion Act continues to be in rules, but it is a position that we've been able to support. And in 2021 and the next biennium, League will protect the right to the range of reproductive health services and oppose efforts in Illinois and nationally to limit or ban contraception, abortion, including medication abortion.
Next, we're going to hear from Bill Kale, who will share with us information regarding our natural resources positions. We have positions on climate change, regarding energy and air, and also regarding water.
Hi, I'm Bill Kale. I'm one of the natural resource specialists along with Laura Davis and Sarah Burry. The League has many positions on environmental protection, and we don't plan to ask for anything new in regard to those positions at this time. Our primary issue will be climate change legislation and plastic waste reduction. Next slide, please. As you can see, we have many areas that are already covered by League positions that give us an opportunity to act. But because of the status of the legislature this year, we're just going to focus primarily on clean energy. Currently, that is primarily the Clean Energy Jobs Act, and there's other possible bills that they might come forward. There's a utility bill and a labor bill, and we suspect the governor may actually be actively planning to create his own bill from pieces out of all of these. So we'll be monitoring that during the year. We also plan to focus a program for local communities to enact and reduce single-use plastics wherever possible. And we'll continue to monitor events involving the rulemaking that has resulted from the passage of the Clean Coal Ash Cleanup Act of 2019. And finally, we're also going to monitor a case at the Illinois Commerce Commission involving Save Our Illinois Land with their partners, the Sierra Club, versus Enbridge, who is hoping to expand or double the capacity of the Dakota Access Pipeline into Illinois. And that's our issues. Thank you.
So next week, the next category is social policies. We have a number of policies under this: affordable housing, gun violence prevention, healthcare, immigration, justice, mental health, school quality and funding, and fiscal policy. Kathy Cortez will discuss the affordable housing issues.
Hi, I'm Kathy Cortez, and I'm one of the affordable housing specialists with the State League. The current position of the State League focuses very heavily on some legislation that was very popular in Illinois that required kind of a fair share where every community would have about 10% of their total housing in affordable housing. And this has been in place for some time. We're continuing to follow some updates. There are some additional teeth and some improvements that need to be made there, and we'll see what the next session of the legislature does in this coming year. But one of the things about the current position is that it starts to reflect a more contemporary view of the housing problem that faces the nation, if not certainly the state of Illinois. Our position advocates for all levels of government to fund affordable housing in one way or another, and that is reflected here. The U.S. position also has some additional positions that it's taking that will allow us to advocate. And one of the things that this position is starting to get us away from a bit is the more traditional thinking that poor people just need help paying for houses, and that will continue for some time to come. Where I think we could add some addition, and you'll see on the next slide, some additional items that are not in our current position, include those areas where housing is designed to help people move from where they are now to where they could be, recognize their potential, and really move people out of poverty. In other words, it's recognizing a position where affordable housing actually becomes a catalyst for moving people out of poverty through educational opportunity, jobs, and so forth. So the two changes that I would like to see made more robust, and that I think we can do some better advocating for, is in two areas. In addition to preserving and expanding the housing supply, what we'd like to see is to be able to put more emphasis behind eviction policy to make sure that those individuals who are currently living in affordable housing do not get evicted for non-cause because simply because someone, for example, wants to raise their rent. So we need more teeth behind non-cause eviction in order to help people stay where they are and help them be able to work their way out of poverty. Secondly, there are some additional areas that really just people need a leg up. People coming out of recovery, veterans, people that have been recently released from prisons, and you'll see a number of others, disabilities, and so on and so forth. And housing really becomes a cornerstone for these individuals to make that life change, to get themselves from where they are to where they need to be. So I think some very targeted legislation around these kinds of programs would be helpful as well. And in addition to lots of other things that will help us improve the supply of affordable housing, these will be the areas that we can focus on in the coming year.
Hi, I'm Jim McGrath. I am the gun violence prevention specialist. So our underlying principle is we want to make society safer. And our position is to update terminology, expand beyond just handguns, which is our current position. So in the next biennium, we want to consider safe and secure gun storage. There's a lot of issues of funding of school counselors and social workers, as opposed to putting guns in schools with school resource officers. Legalizing silencers. There are all kinds of bills proposed every year. The silencers was actually in a bill that was proposed as a wildlife support bill, but we found it. So we would oppose that bill because it would legalize silencers supposedly for the issue of not scaring the wildlife. Ghost guns need to go. Assault weapons, guns in schools of any type, and that's what we're talking about, eliminating opposing school resource officers. Concealed carry, you saw a lot of examples of that with the recent protests and so-called sanctuary counties. In addition to just working with legislation, there are organizations that make proposals that can become legislation. For example, the recent Illinois Association of School Boards had a proposal to change the safe gun storage law from 14 years of age to 18 years of age. That bill failed. We were supporting it, but we will work with the sponsors to come up with a proposal for next year. So there are over 30 gun-related bills proposed in Illinois every year. So we have to follow each one of those constantly. Thank you.
Janet Kraft is going to be sharing with us issues regarding healthcare.
Healthcare. Thank you. The position that we have been using was formed in 1993, and despite all of the changes in healthcare, it is certainly still applicable. I'm not recommending that the position be changed, but after 3 decades, it probably does need an overhaul. As I mentioned, with reproductive choices, they really overlap with the healthcare position. And if you look at where we stand, you'll see that there is a cross-reference to them. Please, next slide. The healthcare position has been used most recently for no tobacco products under 21, Do No Harm Healthcare Act for the General Assembly to scrutinize federal waivers that might negatively impact some of our citizens, and stock asthma medication in school bills, and Prescription Drug Affordability Act, which the bill has not been filed. It has been really opposed very strongly by Big Pharma. Amend Early Intervention Act, and that was a bill that was passed into law to prevent lead-induced cognitive delay in children. And last year, an Infant and Maternal Mortality Act created a task force on infant and maternal mortality among African Americans. We will use our current position to work with our coalition on the possible ACA repeal by the Supreme Court. And we'll look very closely at the COVID-19 vaccine priority status, focusing on those people who are under the social vulnerability index, and a continuing activity on the pandemic effects on communities of color and those in congregate settings.
Oh, I'm Rosemary Heileman, and I'm stepping in today for Kim Reed, who is the specialist for immigration. And Kim points out that we use both the LWVUS and the LWVIL immigration positions to advocate for legislation on the state level to help immigrants and immigrant communities. Some of the ways the positions were used in 2020 were that we supported the following measures in the General Assembly that were successful and passed. One was increasing the immigrant services line item, which is a recurring part of the state budget, which gives grants to social service agencies to support immigrant efforts such as language training and legal services. They also provided additional funds for the Illinois Department of Human Services Welcome Centers for Immigrants and allocated funds from federal COVID relief monies to assist families affected by the pandemic, to include rental assistance and expansion of Medicaid for elderly, uninsured, regardless of immigration status. The position that we currently have, coupled with the national position, has been able to cover most of the things that we are interested in, and we believe the Illinois position should be retained. And we use the national position to specifically advocate for funding for healthcare, housing, unemployment, and education, although that could be added to the Illinois position as a supplement. Next slide. So under our current positions, League of Women Voters of Illinois will continue to advocate for anticipated issues during this upcoming 2021 legislative session. We anticipate supporting continued relief from the pandemic, healthcare for all, economic security for all, which includes that immigrant services line item funding and an earned income credit, and safety for all. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Janet Kitlaus, and my issues are criminal justice, juvenile justice, and death penalty abolition. I don't have to worry too much about that last issue these days, but you never know when the pendulum might swing. Because we are in the process of updating our criminal justice position, we are hoping for a good response from our local leagues by the end of January so that we can craft a new, improved criminal justice position. Right now, LWVIL cannot act on these issues that might arise in the lame duck or new session because we have no position on these, policing or the abolition of cash bail. These are particularly hot topics. However, we expect an omnibus bill soon to be proposed, or a series of criminal justice reform bills, and our present position will allow us to act on these issues. Bills that would reduce admissions to IDOC, bills that would eliminate mandatory sentences related to drugs, bills that would enable inmates to expand eligibility for sentence credits. Now, these bills also, the omnibus bill may also include, or other bills might also include bills that would affect juveniles, and our juvenile position, our juvenile justice position would allow us to advocate for measures such as these. And the pretrial detention of children younger than 13 and limiting pretrial detention to felony offense charges, give lawyers to all children under age 18 during interrogation in cases that could trigger adult sentencing. And finally, begin all cases of children under the age of 18 in juvenile court. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lori Grainai, and my specialty is mental health. The League of Women Voters supports a comprehensive and coordinated system of treatment and rehabilitation services, along with adequate funding for mental health. The League supports requiring local governments to provide zoning ordinances allowing for residential programs for persons with mental illness. The League supports early and affordable behavioral health diagnosis and treatment of children and adolescents. The League supports effective reentry planning and follow-up for people released from both behavioral health hospitalization and the criminal justice system. Currently, prisons in our country are the largest mental health facility. That's why the League also supports problem-solving courts, including mental health and drug courts, to avoid inappropriate entry into the criminal justice system. The League supports health education that integrates all aspects of social, emotional, physical health and wellness. And of course, the League supports efforts to decrease the stigmatization of behavioral health problems in care.
So I'm Jean Pierce, and along with Ann Courter, I monitor issues, excuse me, and legislation relative to school quality, school finance, higher ed, and charter schools. There are a number of things that we anticipate will be coming up in the near future and that we can advocate for or oppose based on our current positions. We definitely can advocate for additional evidence-based school funding, for increasing progressive revenue sources. As you know, we were sorely disappointed that the fair tax failed, but we are not going to give up the effort. We can advocate for increased administrative efficiency. Jane talked about consolidation of governmental units. We can also advocate for measures to increase the quality of instruction, including teacher salaries, support staff, curriculum on Black history, and so on. And we will continue to oppose legislation which will reduce public school resources. At this point, that includes private tuition credits, for-profit charter schools, and property tax caps. In the future, I should say, we hope to be able to advocate for tax caps, property tax caps, once we get better funding from the state. So it all hinges on getting more revenue in a progressive manner. There are some issues that we cannot advocate for right now unless we get a new league position. For instance, the role of school resource officers, or changing requirements for admission to teacher education, or measures to address higher education student loan debt and collection practices, or the right to outdoor recess. We are not necessarily saying that the position needs to be changed, but if you think that these are important enough and you're willing to work with us, then so be it. And we will consider a study to revise and update the education positions.
Great. Hi, I'm Ann Corder, the Fiscal Policy Specialist. As Jean mentioned, we are very disappointed that the Fair Tax Amendment did not pass despite valiant efforts by League members throughout the state. But we still do need revenue, especially so that we can ward off promised cuts in education, healthcare, and human services. So we still need to be very active and consider this as a focus for the coming year. The current positions do permit us to advocate for things in addition to the graduated rate income tax amendment, including expanding the sales tax, increasing the flat tax rate, in conjunction with things like the earned income tax credit to make it a more fair system, consolidation of taxing bodies, and future efforts to amend the Constitution are not off the table, certainly. The current position also permits us to oppose the cuts that have been promised, capping the property tax until there is more equitable funding for education. Expanding gambling is something that the League has long opposed. And shifting school pension costs from the state to local districts has been mentioned over and over, but we need more revenue before the League could support that move. So hang with us, and we will continue to look for additional fiscal policy actions in the future. That's it. Thanks.
So thank you all very much for taking the time to learn about the program planning process, to meet with our issue specialists and find out more about the positions, what we can and cannot advocate for. We look forward to your responses to the program planning process in 2021. Planning for the next biennium. Thank you very much.